today means that you are very much interested in the EU budget, and in particular on the two EU funding programs of the current EU budget, InvestEU and the European Social Fund Plus, ESF Plus. Today we have the great honor to discuss this with very experienced speakers. Peter Surek, CEO of Erste Social Finance Holding and Head of Social Banking at Erste Group. Silvia Manca, Head of Social Impact Programs at the European Investment Fund. And Frankly, Head of Division of Advisory Service at the European Investment Bank. Welcome to all. Thank you for joining this session as guest speakers. I am Bianca Polidoro. I'm the Senior Policy and EU Partnership Manager at the EVPA, and I will moderate this session. But first of all, I will give you a short introduction, then we will have 10 minutes presentation from each speakers, and then a Q&A session. So you can already write your questions on the chat, and we collect them and we will ask the session to the speakers, or you can raise your hands and I will be more than happy to ask directly the questions. We have an open conversation with the speakers. Unfortunately, Peter Surek had a very important commitment last minute, so he will be here only until the presentations, but then he needs to leave us around 11:20. So thank you very much, Peter. Now, I can start with actually telling you that we just published today the EU budget for Investors for Impact, a visual guide to inform investors for impact on how to access the InvestEU and the ESF Plus funding programs and connect with the key players the EU budget. We really told the annual conference was the most important moment in place where we could share this information with the entire EVPA community and with the EU institutions as well. So we can see that the EU budget is composed of the multi-annual financial framework and the NextGenerationEU. And among the several programs of the EU budget, InvestEU and the ESF Plus, composed of three strands, can have a different access for investors for impact perspective. Let me show you this arch where actually you can really identify the access points, the type of funding and the investment areas. Let's start with InvestEU. Please look at the slide and focus on the left side of the screen. You see the guarantee 26.2 billion. And that is provisioned at 40%. This means that the 10.3 billion is set aside in case calls are made on the guarantee. And the access points are implemented for investors for impact perspective, of course, are implementing partners such as the European Investment Bank, the European Investment Fund, and all national promotional banks. The type of funding can be financial products such as debt, equity, or risk-sharing instruments. And the investment areas, also well known as windows, are small and medium-sized enterprise, social investment, skills, research and innovation, and sustainable infrastructure. Of course, we as in EVPA community are very much interested in the social investment skill window. Then we have an advisory part, and for the non-financial support, the InvestEU Advisory Hub, and today, frankly, from the EIB, we'll go much more in depth on the Advisory Hub of the InvestEU and also in the past experience of the Advisory Hub of the European Investment Bank. Now, let's focus more on the right side, looking at the screen with the ESF Plus. The ESF Plus has three strands. The easy strand of the ESF Plus, starting from the right of the arch, the ESF in member states, the ESF Social Innovation Plus. The access point for the easy strand is the European Commission, and the type of funding are awarded grants, service, and or supply contracts and prices. And investment areas are employment, social inclusion and innovation, access to finance, and social entrepreneurship. As for the ESF Plus in member states, we have national regional authorities such as managing authorities. And the type of funding are grants, procurement, and financial instruments, while investment areas, economic and territorial and social cohesion. For the ESF Social Innovation Plus trend, we have as access points an entity entrusted by the European Commission. Then type of funding, the grants and the resources for establishing and running the European Competence Center for Social Innovation, and as investment areas, social innovation and EU transnational projects. Now, since we are very much focused in this session on the access point, how can investors for impact co-invest under InvestEU? Let's have a look at the implementation chain that we just created at EBPA. Foundations, impact fund, banks, just follow the arrow of this in the screen, sit in the first violet box, the financial intermediaries. This is focused from the social investment skills window perspective. Now, the guarantee is split in different areas, so different windows, and for example, the social investment skills window has 2.2 billion. The implementing partners can be the European Investment Bank Group, as I also said before, but also the Council of Eurobank, the BRD, and other national promotional banks. But the EIB Group is responsible for the implementation of the guarantee of the 75%. Then responsibility of the implementing partners to open a call of interest and to make sure that the other financial intermediaries can apply and to start after the screening a potential investment. So all the investors for impact can potentially be financial intermediaries. However, there is also a possibility of having a direct financing. The implementing partner will direct finance the final recipients, because let's not forget the final recipients. We do these investments for vulnerable people, for NGOs, for micro enterprises, social enterprises. So we always need to have the people at the core and look for a society that works for all. Now, let's have a more focus on European Social Fund Plus. Let's do the same exercise. We have capital providers, social enterprises, public stakeholders. Follow the arrow. These are beneficiary organizations. Look at the first blue box of the screen. Actually, the European Commission, the national authorities in each member states that can be potentially managing authorities or intermediary bodies need to sign a partnership agreement and build the framework on each member states of the European Social Fund Plus. Then after that, they also need to agree on operational programs, and under operational programs, they can launch the calls that you as potential beneficiary can apply. And after the screenings, you can start to work with your government and together, of course, in the framework of the European Commission, and address the flow of the money towards final recipients that in this case could be social enterprises, vulnerable people, or NGOs. There is also another strand, the EC strand under ESF Plus, that allows the Commission to provide money directly to beneficiary organization. This means that you, as a beneficiary organization, could apply directly to a call for proposal launched under ESF Plus and the EC strand by the European Commission. Now I will end here, and I'm very happy to give the floor to our first speaker, Peter Surek. Peter, please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bianca. Hello, good morning. I hope you can hear me and see me well. I'm sitting here hidden in the interpreter's room in the Luxembourg meeting of investment committee. And as mentioned by Bianca, I would need to be today quite fast. So I'll just lead you through the slides and share also our experience with using of different EU instruments, because I believe this is the most interesting for you. So firstly, about Erste Group, what is interesting is that we are very old institutions, actually more than 200 years old. It was actually founded in 1918 as the first bank on the Austrian territory that opened its doors to ordinary people. Actually started as a non-profit association, supported vulnerable poor people with saving and lending, and was run by volunteers. Throughout the years, we have developed to a big financial group, which is covering Central and Eastern Europe. And we have basically presence directly in 7 markets, indirect in 11 markets. And what is also interesting to know is that Erste Foundation is the largest single shareholder, and basically keeping the mission of financial inclusion within Erste living till today. Please, next slide. So about social banking, what actually is my role in Erste Group, what we actually cover there, what we do there is multiple dimensions, as you can see it on the slide. We started basically with social banking already in 2006. So before all this whole ESG movement has started and impact investment movement has started, with actually founding a special bank for people in financial difficulties in Austria. And later on, it continued in 2009, where we founded our microfinance company in Romania, supporting small farmers. And basically, I took over social banking in 2013, and we have developed a kind of a systematic strategy for all of our banks to deploy products and services and support instruments for vulnerable target groups. So what we do actually in the aftermath of financial crisis, we focus very much on the job creation. So we support starting enterprises and micro enterprises, not only with financing, but also with non-financial support, with education, with mentoring, with consulting, with the aim to create jobs and perceive jobs in the rural areas. The second activity is focused on social organizations, where we count not only social entrepreneurs, but also non-profits, NGOs, where we also provide them with financing, which is substantially larger. So when we talk about the microfinance, startup finance is usually around 10 to 25, maximum 50,000 euros. Where we talk about social organizations, there the average ticket size is around 100,000, and we can go up to 1 million euro. And it's also accompanied by technical assistance, by business development services, capacity building. And the last pillar is basically direct support or direct programs with people in financial difficulties, where we have specialized support programs for social housing, where we have also programs for helping people in financial difficulties, in over-indebtedness, and providing debt advisory, with the aim to support them to have a better financial stability, financial health. So that's in a nutshell actually what we do in social banking. As you can see on the line below, we supported so far around 15,000 clients with our activities. We disbursed more than 400 million euros of loans, and thereof, and here we come to the EU support programs, we use for approximately 60% of our portfolio the guarantees, which we contracted under Employment and Social Innovation window from European Investment Fund. So that's definitely helping us to be able to take more risk and to be able to reach out to beneficiaries and to target clients to whom we would not be able to reach as a commercial institution. So that's actually the first part where I would like to kind of encourage other impact investors to look at the instruments which can actually help them to de-risk their investments. The other example which I brought up here, thank you, Bianca, for this slide, is that we also try to do a joint ventures and kind of co-invest together with public sector using also EU funds. So one example of that is in Slovakia, where we have developed a special social housing entity, which is basically a joint venture between our entities, which is our local bank, our local foundation, and Erste Social Finance, which is our group company for social investments, and Slovak Investment Holding, which basically uses EU funds, structural and cohesion funds, to be able to support this vehicle. So far, we have approximately 10 million euros of equity in this affordable home special purpose vehicle, which actually is so far buying apartments from secondary market. And these apartments are being rented to NGOs who work with people without home or who are endangered by homelessness. and are renting these apartments to these people on a discounted price. So we are somewhere minus 40 up to 50% towards the market rent, which people can basically afford. And it's following the housing first principle. So bringing basically people without homes to the apartments, and in this way, in a regular neighborhood, to integrate them back to the society. So, so far we bought approximately 50 apartments. We are now scaling it. We would like to reach a size of approximately 500 to 700 apartments, which we can provide to the sector. And this should be also helping us to get sustainable. So that's an additional example, basically, where with co-investment, you can, of course, scale your impact. Target volume of equity for this company is 50 million. It would be hard for us to put 50 million into such a vehicle, but together with the public sector, we agreed to do it. And so that's helping us not only on the side of the risk, but also on the side of scaling, which I think is also a topic for the impact investments, how we can scale, how we can get more resources, how we can get more impact. Next slide, please. The last slide, which I prepared, is actually about our new social finance instrument, which is a quasi-equity, which is basically supporting NGOs and social entrepreneurs who would like to scale their activity, which actually lack capital. So this is what we learned throughout the last years, where we provided basically more than 1,000 loans to social organizations worth more than 100 million euros, that actually many of them we can't finance because of their low capital ratios, low equity. And that's why we came up with this instrument. And the collaboration here with the European Commission actually was that we won a special grant under Easy Window, which helped us to finance somehow all the preparatory work, to finance the research for that instrument and basically structuring it, but also especially where we deploy most of the grant to be able to provide the investment readiness and non-financial support for our beneficiaries for free within this program. So that's basically a third example of how you can utilize the funding from Commission. There are certain calls, certain grants where you can apply, which can basically help you in providing technical assistance in developing something new for the sector. So that helped us substantially, even though the amount was of course not high. It was around 250,000 euros, but still it was a good impulse for our partner Impact Hub and for us to develop this instrument. And so far we are already now live, and we're able to provide the first quasi-equity deals, which maybe for impact investors is very easy because this is what they do. But for a bank, it was quite a big step forwards to move from a pure debt financing into something which is directing the equity way. So I think that's more or less what I wanted to share is our experience. What of course one needs to mention is that the process for application is not an easy one. So you need to dedicate certain resources to be able to contract these facilities when talking about guarantees, or when doing a co-investments with some of these instruments, which will be coming out also from InvestEU window. I think what is also important to mention that, of course, it makes sense once you have multiple transactions. So if you do like one transaction per year, might be for you ending to try to use these instruments, and maybe that's why there could be a role which I did not discuss yet with Bianca, but there could be a role maybe for EVPA to play this aggregator, between the smaller social impact investors, and maybe to kind of aggregate these smaller deals into a larger packages, which would be then easier to digest by EIF or other implementing partners under InvestEU. So that's what I wanted just to share very briefly about our experience. So far we would not be able to do what we have done without these funds. So thank you to the European Commission and their implementing partners EIB, EIF for the great collaboration in that topic.
Thank you very much, Peter. We are very happy. You share very concrete examples, and also the importance of collaborate all together. The European Commission, the network organization, we as a VPA, we are very much looking forward to step on and look for other role that we could play and to strengthen this collaboration in the ecosystem. And now, thank you, Peter. I would like to leave the floor to Silvia Manca from the EIF. Silvia, I'm sharing your first slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you very much, Bianca, and thank you very much, Peter. And I'm really glad that the use of the funds and the instruments that we implemented was indeed successful. And I'm going to share also my perspective on the topic. So, hello everybody, an honor for me to be here today with you, particularly at this crucial moment where we are preparing the launch of the next generation of funding under the InvestEU program. Indeed, I can say a lot of things about the European Investment Fund. We are certainly part of the European Investment Bank group. The EIB is our main shareholders, and the Commission is the second largest shareholders. And we also have in our shareholder bases a number of private and public institutions, which make actually the EIF a kind of a hybrid animal. And I like always to define the EIF as a kind of entity that is trying maybe to build a bridge between, of course, the high-level policy objectives of the European Union that are our driving force, and also the market. Why I'm saying this? You're probably familiar with the business model of the EIF. We do apply an intermediate business model. That means that we do invest either under the debt financing, primarily via portfolio guarantees, or under equity financing, from equity ranging from venture capital to private equity, from seed stage to growth stage, into financial intermediaries. Since our establishment in '94, we have, of course, grown in terms of assets that we manage on behalf of our mandators, notably the EIB, the Commission, member states, but also other partners. We have grown in terms of products that we offer by creating bespoke product offering for the various thematic areas. But I think that the key the way in which I like to think about the EIF is in the next slide, Bianca, if you can move, please, is by looking at the people. So these are just a snapshot of our entrepreneurs that we backed indirectly via our financial intermediaries. You have a couple of figures there in terms of number of enterprises supported across Europe, number of jobs supported, and so on and so forth. So this reminds me that we should never forget what is at the heart of our mission. Therefore, is to make it easier for small businesses access financing. Now, one important point that I would like to share with you is actually in the next slide, and this connects very well with the policy priorities of InvestEU. The EIF has recently embraced a new strategic approach, which is focused on key thematic. And in these 4 pillars that you see on the slides, you will easily recognize also the priorities of the European Union, and at large, the priorities actually of our society. We are talking about competitiveness, growth, and cohesion. We are talking about innovation and digitalization. We are talking about social impact, skills, and human capital. And we are talking about sustainability and green transformation. This scheme is, of course, fully aligned with InvestEU and fully aligned also with the Paris Agreement, and builds the foundation also of the product offering that is coming from the EIF side under the new MFF. Now, focusing specifically on InvestEU, if we move to the next slide, Bianca, please. You already gave a great introduction about what InvestEU is about. It's a budgetary guarantee, and 75% of this budgetary guarantee will be implemented by the EIB group, namely by the EIB and the EIF. But what is at the heart of the InvestEU offering? You might be familiar as impact investors with the previous generation of programs. You know that we like very much acronyms, so maybe the FC, the Innofin, the COSME, the EASY, the CCS. All these programs might sound familiar to you, each of them with its own legal basis, each of them with its own requirements and processes, and so on and so forth. Now, the novelty is that under InvestEU, all this is coming under one roof. And the idea is indeed, of the way InvestEU has been designed, is to have a one-stop shop for financial intermediaries when it comes, of course, to the intermediated model of the EIF, which is not the only model of implementation. Of course, as Bianca pointed, there is also a direct financing model. And the benefit of the approach is that, at least on EIF side, we will have like a single entry point. You know that we work by means of call for expression of interest that are published on our website. So there will be a single entry point that will serve different policy objectives. The financial intermediaries actually will be also incentivized to support SMEs across several InvestEU priorities. Given the fact that all the policies are under one roof, there won't be any more too much segregation amongst all these policy priorities. And of course, it's a way to optimize the InvestEU budget considering the market demand. Now, if we move to the next slide, Bianca, please. So here you have just very briefly a little bit the InvestEU architecture. Just maybe a couple of numbers. So indeed, the InvestEU regulation has been adopted in March. And you have 4 policy windows that correspond to the key, let's say, strategic directions, let's say, for supporting investment. The InvestEU has also a key objective of mobilizing additional investments of 372 billion. And when it comes to the EIF, indeed, I mentioned that we will be an implementing partner, so we will be operating across the 4 policy windows with a specific allocation of the guarantee. We will be operating with an intermediated business model. Therefore, we expect to make the process, let's say, in line with our model so far, but in a much more optimized way. So for those of you familiar with the intermediated model of the EIF, nothing will change. But what would hopefully change is indeed the fact that it would be a much more, let's say, harmonized process and less fragmented, and also focusing much more on market awareness. Couple of technical informations on slide 6. So we expect to make the products available beginning of next year. And in terms of products, you know that the EIF is operating in the equity and in the guarantee business primarily. So in a nutshell, we will basically continue the existing products that we implemented under the previous programming period, but indeed moving under the umbrella of InvestEU. But we will also increase at the same time the focus on the thematic policy areas, which are defined by the InvestEU windows. On the equity side, we'll support indeed all stages of development of the companies via investment in specific financial intermediaries, ranging from the pre-seed stage to the IPO stage, focusing on thematics such as tech, climate, digital, non-tech, edtech, social impact, debt funds, and so on and so forth. On the guarantee side, we will build on the flagships initiatives that we have under the previous period, like Innofin, Easy. You might be very much familiar with that, the skills pilot. Plus, we have developed a new guarantee product to support the green transitions of companies. And the novelty of this period is that the EIF will, for the first time, implement the infrastructure fund, so namely investment in infrastructure funds. And here the focus will be on climate, environment, but also on social infrastructures. Therefore, infrastructures or investments related to health, to housing, to education, and so on and so forth. This is a novelty, let's say, for us. Prior, this type of investments, equity investments, were carried out by the EIB. Important to notice is that there will be cross-cutting topics, such as the horizontal focus on climate and environment, the focus on scale-up financing, a enhanced focus on gender-smart investment, and focus on the just transition mechanism, particularly in the just transition area. Now, Bianca, if you can jump maybe to the next slide. Here you have just a very quick overview about what will be the main themes under InvestEU under both legs, the equity and the debt. I will not spend too much time in here because I mentioned already what the key themes would be, but all will be converging under the 4 policy windows. What is interesting to share is actually in the next slide, what does it mean for the social impact investing community? The fact that we have, for the first time, a dedicated window for the social investment skills allowed actually us to ensure the continuation of the full spectrum approach that we have launched under the previous program. Concretely, this means that we will ensure the continuation of the EASY guarantee and also of the skills and education guarantee pilot. Therefore, the three key areas will be microfinance, social enterprises, and skills and education. We will continue providing capacity building investments, mainly in the form of subordinated debt to social finance providers or microfinance providers. And on the equity side, we will continue implementing or supporting first-time teams or intermediaries investing in a very early stage of the market, as well as intermediaries that are developing and maybe they are, let's say, more operating in a more mature market space. And we will also continue to scale up the pilot on social impact bonds that we have supported under FC. To summarize, going forward, just next slide, please. So what I can indeed confirm is that the opportunity to have a dedicated window will allow us to continue focusing on these key areas to scale up our support. There will be indeed also an enhanced focus on environmental and social thematic investments. So we were not talking about two distinct legs, but we are talking rather about an harmonized and combined actions. We will continue strengthening the ecosystem, both in underdeveloped markets, but also supporting the grow and the scale up or intermediaries that are supporting, let's say, the local ecosystem. And the novelty, and then on this, I will give the floor to Frank, is that we will even more work hand in hand with the EIB advisory team to reinforce the implementation of the financial instruments with non-financial support, namely with advisory and capacity building. And with that, I just ran over by 1 minute. Apologies for that. Thank you very much.
Don't worry, Silvia. Thank you very much. It was a great presentation. And conscious of the time, I would like to leave the floor to Frank to have some more minutes from the question and answers. Thank you very much, Frank. And I will start with your first slide.
Very good. Thank you very much, Bianca. Thank you, Silvia. Good morning, all. I indeed work in the advisory services area of the European Investment Bank, and we are in fact the advisory services department which operates and supports not only the EIB but also the EIF, and some of the slides that were presented by Silvia just now alludes to the fact that advisory services is important also for the types of products that EIF will be promoting under InvestEU and other programs, and certainly in the area of social impact, we see huge demand for the so-called non-financial advisory services. So today I will briefly outline to you two particular instruments on the advisory side. One is indeed the InvestEU Advisory Hub, as it's called, which is to a large extent a successor of what we call the European Investment Advisory Hub. Please forgive me for all of these acronyms and words that we use. Unfortunately, we're too used to working in the Brussels world of programs and funding sources. But anyway, I'll try and make it as simple as I can for those that are not in the detail on this. And the other thing I'll talk about towards the end of the presentation is another advisory platform which actually is supporting more use of financial instruments under the structural funds, the cohesion funds that are made available to member states. So starting with the InvestEU Advisory Hub, this is indeed part of the InvestEU overall architecture, and we hope to be up and running with this probably at the beginning of next year, once we finalized our negotiations with the Commission. And essentially, as we're saying there, it is developing on the experience that we have developed under managing the European Investment Advisory Hub, which is something we've been running since 2015. It was something set up under the Investment Plan for Europe, or the FC program, Juncker plan, as some people call it. The idea behind this was really to create a sort of a one-stop shop advisory hub, essentially, that people could come to, not knowing specifically perhaps what type of advisory support they needed, or needing advisory support at any level of the implementation or identification or preparation of their projects. So the idea here was to sort of provide an easy entry point, and then on our side to work wiring in the background, work out which funding programs could be used to do what, and to provide a sort of an easy service, let's say an embracing service to our beneficiaries. So indeed, the idea was to help in project origination, development, and then eventually supporting implementation of projects. We also have worked over the last 5 years very extensively with national promotional banks and other banks, other intermediaries that are active and have obviously to some extent more knowledge at a local level and experience. And therefore, we have funded a number of local advisory programs that have been set up by these institutions. We've also looked at ways in which we can try to help aggregate small projects. I think this is particularly relevant in our discussions today. It was something that Peter alluded to earlier in his presentation. One of the challenges, I think, in this particular sector that we're talking about is that the projects tend to be very small, and for organizations such as us, even for the larger commercial banks, this is a challenge, finding scale and pulling together projects in an aggregated way. So we have worked on the promotion of investment platforms, as they've been called, under the FC program. Going forward, we will also promote diversification of projects within the union, obviously promoting more activity if we can in cohesion countries. But also, and this is a novelty really for InvestEU, as was presented in previous slides, InvestEU will have very much a much more clearly defined thematic focus with the 4 policy priority windows that have been created for InvestEU. And the advisory hub will operate pretty much in the same way. I'll talk about that in a short while. And then last but not least, and again, probably most importantly for this particular sector that we are addressing today, a lot of the advisory work that we think we will do under the InvestEU Advisory Hub will be targeted at the capacity building of intermediaries, actually, where we acknowledge that as an EU institution operating very much at a macro level, the best way we feel that we can support social enterprises, microfinances, micro enterprises, etc., is by developing the capacity of the intermediaries that we work with, building their capacity to manage the financial instruments that we work with them on, but also providing and setting up these non-financial advisory services that they themselves can help their clients in bringing forward the projects that they have on the ground. If we move to the next slide, please. Very good. So this is, again, a bit of a snapshot of what the InvestEU Advisory Hub will look like. It is indeed focusing, as you see on the right of the slide, on the sectors, sustainable infrastructure being the largest one. That includes, for example, a lot of support in climate and environment, including the ELENA program, which some of you may have heard about, is supporting energy efficiency in buildings. We then have 2 windows under InvestEU, which are effectively merged for the purposes of the Advisory Hub, and that is the research, innovation, and digitalization with the small and medium-sized enterprises support. And then we have probably the most important window for, again, today's session, the social investment and skills window. We expect that within this window, there will also be a focus on 4 primary areas. First one, and the main one, probably being microfinance and social enterprises. Then we have education and skills. We have social infrastructure. And then last but not least is more broadly support for social impact, whether it's methodologies, tools, instruments, etc. And a part of that will be support for social outcomes contracting, something I'll talk about in a short minute. The support will be essentially targeted through three main ways of channeling support. Primarily, support will be at project level. Again, these are for larger projects. When it comes to smaller projects, we feel, as I said before, that the support is better provided in the form of capacity building, as we call it. Market development as well is quite relevant in the sector that we're talking about today. So these are the three main areas and types of activities that will be undertaken by the InvestEU Advisory Hub. Also, just before I forget, the InvestEU Advisory Hub as such will be actually fronted by the European Commission. So people that want to access the support from the InvestEU Advisory Hub will, as a primary port of call, be able to go to the website of the European Commission, where they will be able to find out more about what's available for them under these different windows, etc. And then, where appropriate, they will be directed to relevant advisory partners, as we call them. And these are people like ourselves, the European Investment Bank, which will be one of the larger providers of support under this program. But there will also be other advisory partners that will work with the Commission in order to provide support on the ground. So EIB will be an advisory partner as such of the Commission under the InvestEU Advisory Hub. If we move to the next slide. So I did briefly talk about social outcomes contracting. This is, for those of you who don't know what this is, essentially this is a way in which the public sector procures social services, where the procurement of the services is very much driven by outcomes that the public sector wants to achieve. It is fairly innovative in its approach, insofar as public services are normally procured based primarily more on inputs, and not so much on outcomes. And the benefits that we see of procuring things based on outcomes is indeed obviously that you focus on what you want to achieve, and you are fairly agnostic as to how that is achieved, and you very much leave it up to the private sector and third parties to bid for contracts that the public sector is procuring, and coming up with innovative and new solutions as to how to solve society's challenges today. And that often leads to, and hopefully will lead to, also savings for the public sector in terms of what they spend their money on. It looks more at the prevention of social challenges rather than curing the problem. And we strongly believe in this as a way of procuring social services. And through social outcomes contracting, you also have new ways in which these types of interventions are financed. And this is where we talk about things like social impact bonds and products, for example, that the EIF is promoting and will be promoting under InvestEU. So this is a platform that we've started and are supporting under the European Investment Advisory Hub, and it will continue under the InvestEU Advisory Hub. It is designed targeting public sector generally to raise awareness of what is social outcomes contracting, building the capacity, and then providing support to specific individual member states, whether at national level, regional level, or local level, who are interested in piloting this type of activity. And we're hoping to continue this platform, as I said, under InvestEU, also with additional funding from the European Investment Advisory Hub through till 2023. So something which could be interesting to colleagues. If we move to the next slide, please. And this I think is my last slide. It was really just to talk about the other advisory platform as such that we are involved in. Again, this is together with the Commission. In this case, primarily DG Regio, DG Employment, DG Mari, and DG Agri, the so-called shared fund authorities, shared management fund authorities. And here, essentially, the idea is to promote more use of financial instruments alongside grants in many cases, in areas where it makes sense to invest funds rather than simply finance these or fund these projects with grants. We typically see, obviously, financial instruments being set up to support SMEs, microfinance, of course, energy efficiency investments, etc., etc. And we're working with DG Employment under the ESF Plus program, which will support the financial instruments platform, which we call FI-Compass. And this is something, again, that was set up in the last programming period, and which we hope will, and which will continue in the next programming period, again, to support managing authorities of the structural funds, as well as to a certain extent intermediaries involved in setting up and managing financial instruments. So I think I will stop there. I'm sure there will be a few questions on this. I'm happy to take them. Thanks a lot, Bianca.
Thank you very much, Frank. It was a great presentation. We heard a lot on the Advisory Hub and also the future of within InvestEU. And now I see there are so many interesting questions, and I would like to start with the questions coming from Eva Varga, and this is addressed to Frank Lee. What would be considered small and large projects by the Advisory Hub? Does that indicate a priority to provide advice to governments?
Sorry, the last point was, does it
indicate
a priority to give advice?
Yeah, I can repeat the question. What would be considered small and large projects by the Advisory Hub? Does that indicate a priority to provide advice to governments?
I mean, starting with the last part of the question, it does not at all indicate a priority to give advice to governments. I mean, the Advisory Hub will be available to support both public and private sector. We don't necessarily have a strong, and the Commission doesn't have a strong preference for one or the other. It is true, however, as I said before, that the Advisory Hub, and particularly our organization that will be managing our part of it, we are not best equipped to help very small projects, and there are other players in the market that can and will do that. What we can do, however, as I said before, is that we will work with intermediaries in hopefully in all countries within the EU, whereby we can help them to set up advisory programs, which they can then use to support the smaller projects and the promoters that they work with directly as their clients. And we have done this under the European Investment Advisory Hub, for example, with national promotional banks. We provided funding to help them set up local advisory services. And what is a small project? It's difficult to say in clear terms what that is. Typically, it's a project of less than sort of 10 to 15 million euros worth. So these are obviously very large from the perspective of the audience that we're talking to today. And that's why, as I said, the support to small enterprises and microfinance enterprises, for example, will be better handled through intermediaries and bodies that we will work with rather than coming to us directly.
Thank you very much, Frank, for these answers. I hope we clarify the questions. And actually now we have a very interesting questions also from for Silvia. So Silvia, you mentioned financial intermediaries related to the one-stop shop. Who are these? Can these also be foundations or investment funds?
Absolutely. Thank you, Bianca. Absolutely. Actually, I realized that I haven't mentioned indeed the type of financial intermediary we normally work with. And absolutely, foundations, impact funds, social finance provider, microfinance institutions, other type of intermediaries that would indeed correspond to the eligibility criteria that will be published under InvestEU, and then are providing on the debt side debt financing to the final recipients, to the final beneficiaries, or equity investments to the final recipients, are indeed a target of the InvestEU. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. We have following questions from Anna Surmans from EFC. And actually, it's how foundations can engage around InvestEU with the EIF and the key implementing partners. Do you have any suggestions for the foundations that are really interested in InvestEU?
Thank you very much, Anna, for this question. So we have seen also in our previous programs a growing interest indeed of foundations to act also as financial intermediaries. And in fact, we do have a number of foundations that are either acting as financial intermediaries of the EIF, meaning that they have completed the overall selection process, that they've been entering into a contract with the EIF with respect to specific EU programs. But at the same time, we are also seeing indeed more and more foundations that are, for instance, co-investing alongside the EIF in specific investments. And these are indeed two very interesting avenues. So my wish, my suggestions, Anna, is indeed to keep, first of all, on our side, there must be an enhanced effort in making the foundations community aware about what's coming next under InvestEU. So what type of products, what type of requirements we are associating with this product. And this is indeed our main focus. That will be our main focus once the InvestEU products will be available. And certainly enable or facilitate also the interactions between our respective, let's say, communities, because certainly we are aligned in the mission.
Thank you very much, Silvia. I think this clarifies a lot. And actually, we have another question for Frank. What kind of advisory services the EIB offers are most heavily used?
Which ones are most heavily used? That's an interesting question. I mean, it really depends on the sector and the type of promoter. I think, generally we are, as a infrastructure bank, we tend to use the advisory hub more to support larger projects, larger infrastructure projects like this. And there it's more about, interestingly, it's probably more about identifying and preparing the projects more than actually implementing them. We find that project promoters that come to the advisory hub often don't really know where to start in the process. They have an idea and it sort of needs to be developed a bit further, and it needs to be a project that needs to be put together in a way that it will then be able to attract financing. As a bank, we are obviously interested in supporting projects that will need to be financed and can be financed with bank loans, for example, as opposed to grant funding. So those are the projects, those are the kinds of projects that we tend to look at. We're obviously seeing more and more in the climate space. We're seeing more and more in the digital and innovation space. These are key themes for the EU, and therefore are key themes for us as an EU bank. And therefore, I suppose we see more and more of these kinds of projects coming through.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one session that I think could be addressed to both in the chat, but I will ask Silvia to reply. So from Anya Koenig, to what extent are these activities relevant to European-based investors for development or social enterprises engaging in emerging countries? Any current and future activities that look at synergies or even integrate the European and Development Finance Instrument?
Thanks, Bianca. I got some breaks, so I'm not sure I grasped the question. Can you summarize it again for me, please? Apologies for that.
Yeah, these activities, the activities you mentioned.
But you mean activities like the prospective financial products under InvestEU? So what will be okay? But and I guess also advisory activities, of course.
Yeah, and also advisory activities. That's why I think the session could address to both, so the advisory activities, but also the financial products.
Okay.
Or social for the how this this investment for social enterprise engaging in emerging countries.
So, well, first of all, InvestEU, the InvestEU is dedicated indeed to EU member states that are indeed and that are eligible, let's say, since day one, and then potentially in the future there might be third countries that might be associated with the InvestEU. But the EU compartment, let's say, of InvestEU will start with EU member states. The focus within the EU member states, indeed, will be to ensure also a balanced development of the ecosystem. And since indeed one of the priorities, let's say, of EU programs in general is also to focus in underserved or underdeveloped markets when it comes to specific thematics, I expect under InvestEU that there will be a renewed focus, for instance, in countries or regions where maybe the impact investing ecosystem is not well developed. And for instance, under the previous programming period, it was not rare for us to support the establishment of the first institutional impact fund in a given country. And then since then, we have observed indeed a growing trend. So I do expect to have the same under InvestEU. And this is why the idea is indeed to favor a balanced development of the European ecosystem. So by nurturing ecosystem where maybe there are sporadic impact investments, but also focusing on other ecosystems that might be a little bit more mature, but they still need the public support to scale up. I don't know if I've addressed the question, but I'm also happy to follow up bilaterally.
Actually,
with Anya.
Anya is our colleague, and I think you answered your questions because she really cares a lot of emerging countries. So I think
absolutely
this is a clarification that was needed today. And thank you, Silvia. There are many other questions, but we are running out of time, and I really need to unfortunately close these sessions. I would like to thank you also, like frankly, from the EB, Silvia Manca. Really, thank you very much. I think there are rooms for cooperation. We heard a lot about the potential InvestEU. InvestEU, as you mentioned, just started, and the financial product will be launched the beginning of next year, 2022. So this is just the beginning of a long path where I really encourage all the stakeholders of the social investment ecosystem to cooperate, to work together. We hear this also from Peter Surek today. This is our member, very active on EU funding, and we are very happy to hear that now he's also part of InvestEU Investment Committee. He's talked with us from Luxembourg. So I would like to still thank also the audience and all the partners that were supporting the entire EPA community today. So thank you very much. And now let's have a lunch break, but let's be sure to come back here at 1 p.m. for the other sessions. Thank you very much. And